On a rain-soaked battlefield, a bloodied armored arm lay motionless on the ground, setting a somber tone as the storm's relentless downpour washed over silent defeat. Amid the crimson rain of a ravaged battlefield, Ronin, worn and burdened, knelt alone among the fallen, his desolation deepened by the silent wreckage surrounding him. Gripping his blood-stained sword for support as the storm raged on, he steeled himself with the conviction that this was his last battle and resolved inwardly that he could not afford to fail. In the pouring rain, Ronin collapsed backward in agony from a knife wound as Ade-shan lay motionless nearby, his desperate wail echoing through the storm-soaked silence. Rain poured relentlessly over the battlefield as Ade-shan and Ronin lay battered and broken on the sodden ground, their exhaustion and defeat heavy in the somber air. Rain poured relentlessly as Ronin stood alone, blood streaking down his face while he let out a weary sigh that spoke of resignation and pain. Under a blood-red sky, Ronin stood with weary shoulders, surveying a battlefield strewn with lifeless bodies as he reflected grimly on the countless ways each had met their end. In the suffocating heat of battle, Ronin's bloodied face twisted with raw frustration as he muttered a curse beneath his breath. In the cold rain, Ronin, wounded yet resolute, turned his head and silently admitted to himself that the error had been his alone. In the dim glow, the camera lingered on the lower half of Ronin's face, his features taut with amazement as he privately admitted he had never imagined a human could possess such power. Beneath a rain-soaked, crimson sky, a bloodied and battered Ronin glared upward, gritting his teeth with defiant resolve as he taunted his unseen foe about his own improbable survival. Amid the silent aftermath of battle, Ronin stood resolute atop the chest of the defeated giant winged figure, sword in hand, the weight of hard-won victory settling heavily in the somber air. Bathed in radiant light and surrounded by drifting feathers, the awe-inspiring figure of Ahayuti the giant was revealed, his curved horns and luminous eyes casting a majestic presence over the scene. Amid a blazing red sky, a radiant, horned giant with glowing wings descended above two others, as the epic revelation declared this being the last of the legendary three giants. On a battlefield consumed by fire and chaos, ominous figures loomed over the empire as Ronin lay wounded, the suddenness of their appearance and the senseless destruction they unleashed casting a shadow of dread across the land. In the dim light of a rain-soaked alley, Ronin's boot crashed down onto the wet pavement, the forceful stomp sending water spraying as tension crackled in the air. Under a storm-laden crimson sky, Ronin knelt alone amid the shattered remnants of the battlefield, weighed down by grief as a voice accused him of causing the empire's ruin and questioned his right to survive. In the relentless downpour, Ronin's boot pressed resolutely onto the glowing robotic head, his presence radiating foreboding as he silently assured that the moment of his return to his creator was at hand. In the relentless downpour, a bloodied Ronin stood over his fallen foe, his solemn gaze sharpening with resentment as he muttered a bitter wish that the dead would be waiting on the other side. Rain poured over the battlefield as Ronin, resolute and cloaked, planted a weapon atop the horned giant's chest and coldly remarked that if the others were searching for friends, they should know one companion had been incinerated by the fearsome red dragon. In a blazing inferno where smoke swirled and shadows danced, a fierce dragon erupted with a torrent of fire, igniting the heart of the chaos with relentless intensity. Amidst the lingering embers and swirling smoke, Old Man Loran stepped forward with unwavering focus and, summoning the radiant power of a glowing magical circle, sealed the other force away forever. Bathed in the fiery glow of sunset, Ronin, bloodied yet unbroken, locked eyes with his unseen adversary, his defiant glare daring them to understand the full weight of his challenge. Mid the crackling red storm, Ronin, bloodied but unbroken, stood atop the horned beast's skull, his sword raised in silent defiance as an unseen voice warned that he could not hide the truth from those bound by the star's shared senses. Amid relentless rain and the aftermath of violence, Ronin stood wounded and resolute, his somber expression revealing an acute awareness of the grim fate awaiting all who dared challenge their foes as he asked if the true weight of these sacrifices was understood. Beneath a storm-lashed, blood-red sky, Ronin knelt beside the fallen warrior amid shattered ruins, the weight of loss pressing down as he realized that with this final sacrifice, there remained no one left like him to defend the land. Rain hammered down as Ronin's battered face lifted defiantly, his eyes blazing with the unyielding declaration that he was still standing while challenging the absence of any remaining warriors. Suddenly, the ominous glow of an eye filled the frame as a sharp blade hovered menacingly close, and a cold, unseen presence warned that arrogance was futile, for its time too was almost over. In the ruins of a dimly lit battlefield, Ronin stood over a shattered robotic head, his boot pressing down with ruthless finality as he admitted a sense of relief, reflecting that had this opponent discovered their talent earlier, they might have posed a serious threat to his ambitions. Rain and blood streaked Ronan's face in a tense close-up as, through clenched teeth, he accused his unseen adversary of deliberately provoking his anger. In the relentless downpour, a bloodied Ronan stood with defiant bitterness, declaring that his life had been cursed long enough and demanding, through clenched teeth, that fate should leave him to face ruin alone. In the eerie glow cast by the giant horned mask-like face, Ronan stood resolute with a knife poised near its eye, exuding both tension and unexpected respect as he acknowledged his admiration for the remarkable human before him. Rain streaked across the tense darkness as Ronan's gloved hand locked around the weapon handle, a silent promise that everything was about to change. Rain-soaked strands clung to Ronan's bloodied face as a somber red glow flickered behind him and, with a voice heavy with despair, he pronounced that there was no hope left for their world. On a rain-soaked battlefield shrouded in an ominous gloom, a massive creature marked with intricate symbols lay defeated, its dark aura flickering as an unseen force declared that it was destined to be swallowed by the relentless starlight of their power. Lightning split the storm-dark sky as Ronan, eyes blazing with resolve, hurled himself spear-first toward the monstrous winged creature, rain cascading around their desperate clash. In the looming darkness, an ominous silhouette emerged, its form wreathed in swirling energy and pierced by a single, menacing red glow. In the dim light of the battleground, Ronan, worn yet resolute, stood with his back to the shattered form of his defeated foe, the ominous clang of the fallen helmet echoing the weight of victory. Rain poured over the battered city as Ronan, bloodied and exhausted, struggled to catch their breath beneath the relentless downpour. On a rain-soaked night, Ronan stood over the blood-stained earth, his silhouette heavy with regret as he acknowledged in a low, defeated voice that nothing could be undone. On a desolate path slick with rain, a solitary muddy boot plunged into a shadowy puddle, sending ripples through the gloom and hinting at an ominous presence. Rain poured down in relentless sheets as Ronan, battered and bleeding, forced himself onward through the storm, each ragged breath a testament to desperate determination. Rain hammered the battered streets as Ronan's bloodied face lifted toward the storm, each ragged breath betraying the desperation and exhaustion gripping him. As the downpour echoed his struggle, Ronan found himself surrounded on a jagged rock by four imposing men whose unyielding stares pressed into him, turning the exhaustion in his eyes into quiet resignation as tension crackled in the air. On a tense afternoon thick with uncertainty, Ronan lifted their gaze, surprise flickering across their face as an unseen presence drew near. Then, as Ronan steadied themselves, an old ally stepped forward with a smug smirk, announcing that they must be the famous Ronan she'd heard so much about, her words laced with intrigue and challenge. Beneath the soft glow of dusk, outside a weathered tent, Ronan sat among his companions as laughter and camaraderie filled the air, each man savoring the warmth of shared friendship. Rain poured relentlessly as three figures loomed over the battered form of Ronan, whose blood mixed with the mud while his adversaries regarded him with a tense, grim satisfaction. Blood and sweat streaked Ronan's determined face as, with exhaustion etched in his eyes, he acknowledged that everyone had gathered before him, fully aware of the confrontation ahead. On a storm-lashed battlefield littered with fallen soldiers and glinting spears, Ronan, shrouded in a dark cloak and radiating contempt, stood alone, gripping a bloodied sword as they derided the defeated with scornful finality. In the relentless downpour, Ronan stood with rain-soaked feet planted on the splattered ground, his voice laced with smug taunts as he questioned why his fallen opponents had chosen pride and defiance over survival, scoffing at their belief that they could rival his strength. In the cold rain, Ronan's gloved hand is pressed over his dead comrade's bruised face. Ronan wished he would have escaped when he had the chance. As thunder rumbled over the battered field, Ronan, standing amidst the fallen, struggled to comprehend how the giants could have resisted even the overwhelming aura of the Empire's greatest swordsman. Rain poured over the battlefield as a bloodied Ronan stood alone, his weary gaze heavy with regret as he reflected on how only his sword had turned the tide, believing that his actions had forced the penal soldiers to lead a fatal charge and mourning that, because of him, another had been the first to fall. Rain streaked down the battered face of Ronan, his weary eye reflecting both pain and unyielding resolve as he exhaled a ragged sigh into the storm. On a rain-soaked street illuminated by a sinister red glow, Ronan knelt alone in utter despair, quietly admitting confusion and helplessness as the storm pressed down around him. Rain hammered the desolate street as Ronan, bloodied and trembling, lifted his gaze with desperate, glowing eyes and called out into the darkness, pleading to know if anyone was there. Rain poured over the shattered street as Ronan, wounded and vulnerable, struggled to move, panic rising within him when a mysterious voice suddenly pierced through the storm. As the rain continued to cascade down, Ronan's bloodied face froze in disbelief, his eyes widening as the shocking realization dawned that she was still alive. The mud splattered as Ronan, gripped by desperation, drove his dagger into the sodden earth and pleaded in a hoarse whisper for anyone to help. In the bleak downpour, a cloaked and determined Ronan stared in shock at Ade-shan, wounded yet alive, clutching her sword on the rain-soaked ground, as he realized with tense disbelief that she had survived. Rain streaming down his bloodied face, he clenched his jaw and met the pain with unwavering resolve, determination sharpening in his eyes even as the storm pressed in around him. In a dramatic, red-hued expanse of jagged rock, Ronan was hurled backward by a sudden, thunderous impact as Ade-shan stood unwavering, her determined presence dominating the chaos. Then, through the relentless downpour and streaks of blood, a stunned voice broke the tension as Ronan managed a weary smile, gripping his weapon to reveal that against all odds, she had survived. On a battlefield stained with tension, Ronan's bloodied face twisted in shock as he cried out desperately for Ade-shan. Rain pelted the ground as Ronan's armored hand, battered and trembling, released crimson droplets that mingled with the mud, heavy with the weight of his weariness and dread. Rain mingled with blood as Ade-shan, battered yet unyielding, stood in the aftermath of battle and called out to the Grand Marshal with unwavering resolve.